Hey everybody, it is Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. I'm going to talk about Jawbreakers God King. I just got this today in the mail and I read the whole thing in one sitting, which surprisingly took me longer than I expected it to, and that's a good thing. That is in a good way. So we're going to get into that. Let me remind you, this is not a review. This is just me talking about a book and giving my opinion. Make your own opinions. The idea here is not really to get into too much of the content of the story, but I will just a little bit. And before we get into this, take a look at Downcast number 2. It's going to be called Downcast Rise and Fall. Join the mailing list. It's in the description below. Richard Meyer has inspired a lot of people to do indie comics through crowdfunding. And I'm not alone. I'm one of those people that was inspired to do it. And so I see this as my indie book. This is special. I really care about the story. I've been working on it for years. So cool to see the thing in print now, and the second part is underway. So please join the mailing list. You can get discounts and secret perks.
But hey, punching Nazis is still always a great idea.
All right, I haven't figured out exactly what the title of this is going to be, but I think it's safe to say that at this point, Richard Meyer is a comic professional. Now, I know that seems really silly to say at this point when he's been making comics for a couple years and making a living off of it. I don't know how long he's been at it really, but he's got a flow going. He's got a process. He's got a body of work under him. He is as much of a professional as any other pro out there working in comics for Marvel or DC or anybody else. And I would argue in some cases he's more of a professional because many pros working in the industry are, they've got day jobs or doing other things because they can't really afford to live off of comics alone. So when I say that he is a professional in comics, what I mean is that he is working at a professional level. It's funny because all it takes is a little bit of free market capitalism to inspire people to do really good work. And essentially that's what it comes down to. And I've been through this process too, but you put out a book. It's your first book, you're learning, you put out another book, there's a bit of a learning curve, but at some point you have to get it under control and you have to be putting out professional content that can compete with Marvel and DC. And Jawbreakers God King is symbolic essentially of him having passed that point. He's proven that he's done enough crowdfunders. He's not going away anytime soon. Honestly, it does not matter what happens and how the market changes or shifts. He's still going to be making comics. I mean, there's too much here of a foundation built to go away. We're talking 6,277 backers that backed this campaign. That's a lot. I don't have to tell you, that's a lot of people that backed it. All right, so I will say a few things I want to point out. I've always felt that Richard had a good knack for dialogue. I felt like he had voice. I've mentioned that before. The biggest problem that I saw in his writing before was the pacing, plotting and pacing, because everything just seemed like it was really, really fast. Those problems, again, little free market capitalism does that for you. Those problems were solved in here. Everything was paced at a nice pace. And then I get to this point where it's like, it becomes creative decisions. That's what it is. And I'll explain what I mean by that. When you read a book that is written by an author that you really, really respect, or you even admire what they do, you've already enjoyed their works that they've done before, you give them a lot more leeway. You're reading the book from a perspective that you want to enjoy the book, and you're probably going to enjoy the book unless they give you a reason not to. Now, when you've got this mindset, I think, honestly, that's a much more enjoyable reading experience because you're allowing the writer and the artist, the creative team, to do their thing. You basically have given them the reins, they're driving, and you're just going through and experiencing the story. Now, when a story messes up over and over and there are big mistakes, it's going to take you away from that story, and you realize that you're going to have to put in a lot more effort yourself to figure out what's going on. And frankly, I think that's what makes something amateur, right? When there's a room to grow, and you gotta do some other thinking outside the box to make it work. So in this case, Jawbreakers God King, it made sense. I especially liked at the beginning he did this recap thing last time on Jawbreakers. And I went through some of the things, which was actually good because I forgot some of the things from when I read Jawbreakers Lost Souls. So that was nice. It brought me up to speed. The story has a really nice climax. It's very dramatic, and I found myself wondering how they were going to get out of the problem. The stakes were big. The stakes were very big. And last but not least, I found that Knife Hands, I think, is actually my favorite character. There was that awesome action scene. I'm going to see if I can find it here. This is a clip from it. This action scene of Knife Hands starting in an elevator, and it goes crazy from there. But it was such a cool action scene, and it made me like, okay, I'm sold on the superhero power of making your hands into these like glowing, cutting, knife hands. That was pretty legit. Other really great action moments. Again, same voice that I heard, and also the writing, it was a step up. All right, so I said this is not a review, so I'm going to move out of, talking about the story mode. A few other things I was thinking about was the package. Looks great. It is a total of 96 pages. I know because I counted every single one of them. I was just curious at how thick this thing was. It was just bigger than I thought it would be. There was just more story content. And so I went through and read it. This is the art from Charlie Snogan's story. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. It was awesome. It made me, I don't know. Guys, I've had a little bit of time off for Christmas. We're just gonna move off to the side for a minute here, and I was like, I really want to improve my drawing ability, and so I'm gonna really work on it. For a lot of reasons. So there's this website called reference.dailysketch.net, and basically you can pick what you want to draw, and it'll just show you pictures for 30 seconds, and you just practice quickly drawing them. Anyway, so I was like, yeah, I'm improving. I've been putting a lot of work into this. This has been pretty good. And then I see Charlie Snogan's artwork, and I've seen it before, but I see it again, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know how you get that good. It's amazing. Aaron Alfecci blew me away. Amazing. Chuck Dixon's story in there was fantastic. It was great to see Jawbreakers written from just a slightly different voice. Writers often get overlooked as to how much they contribute to a story. And when you get to see the same kinds of characters, the same world being written by different writers, it actually kind of fleshes things out a little bit more. And it was fun to see Chuck Dixon take a stab at Jawbreakers. So I'm really thinking about what's next here. There's no reason not to continue Jawbreakers and do another story. I think he is working on one. I believe I've seen Aaron Alfecci post artwork online. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that there's another Jawbreakers story coming down the pike. And that's great. And I've got something that might be a little controversial to point out, and I'm just going to say it anyway. I'm not convinced that this graphic novel format is actually the right way to go. I think graphic novels are great. I usually buy graphic novels, but from a production standpoint, it's like you get funding to make a book, and then you've got a timetable, and people are going to lose their minds if you are not on time every time. And so you feel like you need to do 94 pages of content, which is essentially what I'm doing for Downcast 2. But just like in doing some reflection, am I happy to pay $25 for this over, a 48-page floppy? Because the main story here was still 48 pages long. Honestly, I'm really not sure. I keep going back and forth on this. There's something nice about it. You get to put it up in your bookshelf. At the same time, I don't know. I kind of thought about how it is kind of a shame that this whole God King story was never in floppies. Didn't make it to floppies, unless I'm missing something. And maybe that'll happen down the road, perhaps. Who knows? Maybe he'll combine both books at some point and make a bigger graphic novel version. Why not? I mean, it's there anyway. When he needs to do a reprint, he could certainly do that. All right, I totally got off track. All right. Well, last point I want to make, and that is that for so long, it seemed like Richard Meyer's an outcast from the industry. He's not allowed in, basically. And so many comic pros essentially said just that in, so many words. But it doesn't really matter now. Honestly, it doesn't. If SPLATO, SPLATO Comics, if SPLATO Comics were to decide to put out monthly issues of something, I would bet he could do that. Maybe not this year. Maybe eventually he could do that. He could put out monthly issues if he wanted to go that route. He could be putting out stories, several different titles. Even if he went to like 6 different titles, he could probably do that. That's because nothing that's happening in mainstream comics is so impressive and so powerful that it can't be done here. So I'm interested to see what happens next. Honestly, I'm really interested about the history of all of this. When I'm looking at these 2 graphic novels, I think of what is to come 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. There's bound to be some legacy left behind from all of this. The only real question for me is, how big of a chunk out of mainstream comics does he want to take? How big of a chunk out of the comic industry does he want to take? So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you watching. Don't forget to sign up for the mailing list for Downcast 2. And not only that, but it's going to open the door to, I think, some other things that are going to be coming down the pike for me. So thanks very much for your support, and I will see you next time.